What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Gen Z Money Podcast, where we turn financial peace to your reality. I'm your host, James Bowman, and today's guest, guys, I spoke with Justine. And when I tell you this was such a phenomenal conversation, she is so, how to put this, she is energetic, she is passionate, and she just has this way that she carries herself that is extremely powerful in getting her points across. So this is actually the first time on the podcast where we went over time, right? And so I'm actually going to split this conversation up into two different episodes. One will be released this week and one is going to come out next week in kind of a two-part series, just because of how deep and how concise the conversation actually got, and how much we both really enjoyed the interaction because she brought so much value. So I really hope that you guys enjoy this. Like I said, she is very explosive, she's passionate, and some may seem that she is harsh, but I am absolutely here for it. I've always been the one to say what you're thinking, and if you have to be afraid to offend some people. So this one might offend some people and it might offend your beliefs, but guess what? It's our beliefs. And we get into, I'm not even going to expose how deep we get into these things. I just want you guys to experience it for yourselves. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get right into the interview. What's going on, Justine? Welcome to the Gen Z Money Podcast. How you doing today?
I am fired up. It's 10 a.m. here in LA, and I'm super excited to be here. Again, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me and having me on your podcast, James. I think this is going to be, I know it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on. The honor is truly all mine. I mean, I've been following you on Twitter for a while, and I just love all of the information that you're putting out and how you're drawing all of these correlations between finances and fitness, which is exactly why I wanted to bring you on the podcast to talk about it, because there's so many similarities between the two.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And so, finance for me is really big in my life, and taking care of myself and my health is more important than finance, if that makes sense. I always believed that if you are a healthier version of you, you can do anything and everything that you want in this world. So you can't enjoy the finer things in life if you aren't healthy. And so that's why I prioritize fitness and health. And that alone then influences all the other pillars and aspects in my life, including finance. So that's why I do that nice little blend together.
I absolutely love it. So, Justine, let's start from the beginning. Let's start from little Justine, right? 5 or 6, running around grade school, like 5 years ago. So, how was money talked about and viewed as you grew up?
So my parents are actually immigrants. My brother and I are first generation. And so my parents came from the Philippines, from these very, very small villages up north in Ilocos. And so, when they come from very small villages, they don't have much. But let's not get that twisted though, right? Like, because some of the places I've traveled in the world where they really have nothing, they're probably the happiest. You know what I mean? So my parents came from these very small villages in the Philippines, and when they immigrated to the United States, they were hustlers, right? Like, my dad worked 2 jobs. He was lucky enough to become a lawyer here. He was a lawyer in the Philippines, but then he became a lawyer here in the US, and he worked 2 jobs. So he was a lawyer, and then he also worked a side job with his family. Medical transportation business. And then my mom, she took care of me and my brother. So she kind of put her dreams and everything on the side to take care of me and my brother. And so, I shout out to my parents. Like, I love them, and I'm so incredibly grateful for what they have taught me and my brother. And one of the things that they really instilled in me and my brother is to save, save, save. Right? From a very, very young age, my parents were like, Justine, save, 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 save your money so that you can buy a house someday, so you can do X, Y, and Z. And so that was pretty much the extent of our money conversations, right? It's just like to save your money. Now, when I talk about savings, y'all, like what I knew when I was a kid was the word, like the initial CD, certificate of deposit. I'm not even talking about the discs. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not even talking about the CD compact disc that you put in. I'm talking about certificate of deposit. So like that was what I knew what a savings account was, because my mom was like, every time I had some money from family for Christmas, for birthdays, whatever, my mom would say, do you want to put that into your CD? Do you want to put that into your savings account? So they basically told me and my brother from day one, whatever money you get, save it, save it. That was a suggestion, if that makes sense. My parents, at the end of the day, though, even though they suggested we save, never ever did they ever force us to do anything that we didn't want to do. So again, I'm grateful for my parents for teaching us that we can do whatever we want in life, and being able to give us great advice. And if we want to take it, we take it. And if we don't want to take it, then we don't take it. And at the end of the day, my dad would always say, it's your life, Justine. We already lived our lives. Mom and I, we already lived our lives. So it's going to be your life, and you decide what you're going to do with your money and so forth. So that was really like, James, that was really like the extent of that money conversation. It didn't go more than that, if that makes, that makes sense.
No, that makes 100% sense. And one thing I want to point out that I've definitely learned over the years, and that I've observed over the years, especially when it comes to people who immigrate into this country from other places, they seem to always, and I'm gonna use the word always, they're always taking advantage of the opportunities that we have here. Right. I mean, when it comes to, they're always starting businesses, taking advantage of the education that we have here, and just all of the resources. They're always taking advantage of them more than people who are naturally born here and were naturally given these opportunities. So it doesn't really surprise me that your parents also came over and they took advantage of all the things that America has to offer, and they went for that American dream, right? And a lot of people say, oh, the American dream is dead, but every day we see there are more and more people coming over from different parts of the world and still obtaining that. So it's hard for someone to tell me, oh, that American dream is dead, when there are people literally coming over here and seizing the opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. I think that was one of the biggest things that my parents taught us, is that, even though they didn't really talk about money, they showed us how important it is to, if you work hard and you have that work ethic and you're disciplined, you will be rewarded. You know what I'm saying? So like, again, my parents come from these very small villages, but my father, with the resources that he had, he worked his way up and ended up going to law school in the Philippines. And so if he can do that in the Philippines and was able to do that here in the US, like, yo, I can't have any excuses. You know what I'm saying? Like, I literally can't, especially because I was born here too. That's another thing. And shout out to my mom, even though she dedicated so much of her life to take care of me and my brother when we were kids. Eventually, James, my mom opened up a little flower shop, a little silk flower shop, and she like allowed her creativity to blossom there. And so my parents always showed with action, and they didn't tell us about money, but they showed to us that if you work hard and you're disciplined, you'll be rewarded, and I think that's absolutely powerful when it comes to talking about money and those types of conversations, because sometimes, James, and maybe you agree or not, but yo, a little less talk and a little bit more action. You know what I'm saying? So
it's crazy that you bring that up, because I find myself talking to a lot of people in recent times that are all at a lot of talk, but then their actions don't necessarily reflect the teaching things. And I had Joe from the Stacking Benjamin podcast on the podcast. He was talking about being a financial advisor and having absolutely like wrecked his finances. You know, he was in tons of debt, living paycheck to paycheck. So it's like you have people who have the knowledge, but they're not living it. And experience and wisdom speaks louder than just having knowledge.
Yeah. 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 100%. I think that's, I sign up for that. I agree 100%.
Yeah. And then one last thing on the subject before we move on. I think another aspect of your story is that even though the extent of your investing through your parents was through that thing that is called a CD, but it's not a little disc, but the thing is, it was safe. And when you come from having no money, you value your money a lot more, and so you evaluate risk a little bit heavier than someone who has always had money, and they have a mentality like, if I lose this money, I know I can get more.
Yo, can we talk about that? Let's talk about that, because scarcity mindset, right? Like if you literally come from nothing or very little, whatever you earn, you're just going to want to hold on to it, and you don't want to lose it. And you're probably going to be less risk adverse. You know what I mean? Because you're just, or, you don't want to take those risks. Right. And so that was my dad. That was my dad and my mom. It's just like, they have always played it safe. And it's crazy. I had this beautiful conversation with my brother a couple of weeks ago. We spent an hour on the phone, and we were talking about how we were raised and like how grateful we are, because even though our parents did not invest, they were not actively in the market putting their money there, they saved. And like they saved their money, and they were able to plant their seed and like be successful here in the US. And it's because they saved. It's because they were saving. And let me talk about something real quick. My mom is like the number one negotiator. Y'all want to raise? Learn from my mother. Learn from my mother. I swear. You know what? Every Saturday, she used to take me and my brother here to downtown LA. There's like the fashion district, the flower district, and in the toy district and whatnot. We would literally watch our mother. Like we'd say, yo, we want this toy right here, right? Even though this is a little hair tie right here. We want this toy, or she wants to buy these flowers for her silk flower shop. We would literally, the guy'd be like $20. My mom's like 10. And then she would have the face of just like, I'm not playing with you. You're going to give it to me for 10, and literally we learned how to negotiate and hustle from our mother. You know what I'm saying? So it's crazy when you have that scarcity mindset. You really learn how to just like hold on to your money and somehow make more money with just saving and also negotiating. I guess those were really great lessons that my brother and I learned, especially me. I learned that as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess that's kind of what her environment groomed her to be. Because
Right.
I'm sure she didn't learn that here, because nobody negotiates in the United States. I mean, we're just like, price tag is this, I'll pay it. But in the Philippines, I assume, I haven't been, but I assume it's much different there. Everything is negotiable.
Oh, it definitely is 100%. So it's my mom, like, and you can do it here in downtown LA because you can, but it's just like you're not gonna walk into Macy's and be like, hey, can I get this first? You know what I mean? So I would definitely say, like, when you come from very little, and saving is a big thing. For every little dollar that you earn, every little penny you earn, like, it's important to save. So I think it's important to save. Absolutely, 100%.
Absolutely, I agree. Okay, Justine. So let's talk about, as you got older, was there a point, because you learned some very fundamental lessons from your parents growing up? Were you making any big financial mistakes as you got older that you later needed to correct? I see you grinning, so I know there's some juicy stuff coming right now.
Okay. So financial mistake, big one. Number one, I opened a Macy's credit card. So, and I say this because I was like, I don't know, like 18 at the time, right? I was shopping at Macy's. I was at the cashier ready to check out. Lady totally got me on, hey, 15% off if you open a Macy's card today. Except you see how they frame it? You know what I'm saying? A Macy's card. Like they're not saying a credit card. They're not talking about that. And I wouldn't know anything about credit cards except that they're bad for you because that's what my parents taught me. And like, we don't learn about credit cards in school, right? So in my mind, Macy's card does not equal credit card. So I ended up opening the credit card because I was like, ooh, 50% off. Next, I come home. I'm like, Mom, look, I opened a Macy's card. And she like was, oh, why did you open the card? You know, like she was not happy. But then you can imagine. But now at that moment, my mom's saying to herself, like not to herself, but she's telling me, okay, Justine, this is what we're going to have to do. I'm going to have to teach you about paying on time. I'm going to have to teach you about the minimum payment. And then now I got to talk to you about the interest rate. And of course, it's like, I'm 18 years old. It's, what's it called? It's like high percentage rate. They gave me a $200 credit limit. Like, you know, so my mom at that point then had to switch into gear and say, okay, this is what it means to pay on time. And this is what happens if you don't, because you're going to get slammed with fees, minimum payment, and all of that. And so for me, that was a financial mistake, but also a learning lesson. And that was like my big first financial mistake because I didn't know anything about a credit card. But I just like, you see what I'm saying? Like there was no way that I could have like questioned a credit card. I could have asked more questions. I could have stopped myself. It was a bad financial mistake because now I have this credit line open and I didn't know the consequences that could happen, like that could come with it if I spent over, went over the credit limit, didn't have money, didn't pay on time, and all of that. So that was like definitely my big first financial mistake that I made when I was younger, for sure.
Okay, so just I gotta play a little devil's advocate here. There
Okay.
are much worse mistakes you could have done than opening up a credit card. I get that it was a mistake, but looking in the grand scheme of things, I think you gonna be all right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know, I totally get it. I totally 100% get it. And that's why I'm like, you're right. In the grand scheme of things, was it really that bad? No, it was not really that bad, right? It wasn't. But you know, there was my thing, James, was every time I had money, I would want to like travel. You know what I'm saying? I would want to travel. So the first time I traveled was when I was like 18 years old. I went on this Europe trip with my class. And that was the only trip that my parents paid for. And then everything after that, when I decided to like move abroad and live abroad and then also travel the world, all of that was funded by me, right? There was a time when I was in Greece and I really wanted to go to Spain. And so I overcharged like my checking account. Like what's the word I'm looking for? I spent all my money in the checking account. I couldn't get a flight home, so I had to call my parents for that one. You know what I'm saying? But it's like little things like that about not budgeting and not tracking my money or my cash flow, because all in my mind, I was just thinking like, oh, I've saved enough now to travel the world. And then kind of exhausting that account and not having an emergency fund. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So those are, I would say those are not when you're younger, those were like bad mistakes in terms of like trying to get my finances in check. But you're right. It could be worse, man. It could be worse.
Yeah. And I think that what you're trying to convey is the impulsiveness that you were dealing with. You know, opening that credit card was kind of an impulse at the time. Same way with you being in Greece. It was just an impulse like, I'm going to go to that country over there, you know, and not really understanding the full ramifications of the decision. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that does. That's exactly what it is. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, I'm 20, 21 years old, 22, like traveling the world, I'm thinking, but yeah, I would say impulse buying those are financial mistakes for sure. I have 3 breaking points though, right? 3 major breaking points that made me realize like, yo, I need to take care of my finances and I need to be better at money. I need to be better at money. So there were like 3 major turning points in my life that help shape the Justine that you're talking to today.
Well, you can't just tease it in. Let's go, Justine. What was breaking point number 1? Because, okay,
right.
First of all, I want to give you my opinion. I think if you had 3 breaking points, I think the first 2 didn't count, but I want to hear all 3 of them.
Happy to share. So breaking point number 1, all right. I was 24, 25 at the time, and I was living in Istanbul, Turkey. So I was teaching English there in Istanbul. And during that time, there was major civil unrest, right? Major civil unrest. So during that time there, I was working so incredibly hard. I was working 7 days a week, 12-hour days teaching. They rarely gave me time off. And I was like earning the Turkish lira, right? So if I'm earning the Turkish lira and then I have student loans that I'm paying back at home in US dollars, like you can imagine that conversion rate, it sucked. Like it was not good at all. So not only was I working these really long days, but I also had to pay for my student loans while I was abroad, right? So that conversion really hurt me financially. And then on top of that, I wasn't getting any breaks, you know what I mean, from teaching. So when the civil unrest happened and the Gezi protests happened, there was like my apartment was bombed. Like I had to move like 5 different times. I had to find ways to get to work because I remember one point I was living in an apartment. And if you looked down, you could see the military right on my street, and they had barricaded the streets. You really couldn't go in and out. And I remember calling my boss and being like, hey, my street is literally blocked off by the military right now. What do I still come in? What do I do? And I remember my boss was like, you still need to come in. So I was like, in my mind, James, I'm not earning a salary. I'm an hourly worker. So if I don't go to work, I'm not getting paid. If I don't get paid, like I'm not putting food in front of me. I'm not paying rent, and I'm not paying my student loans back home. And it was just so incredibly hard for me, James, where I literally was like, dude, I have to pick between food and rent. Like what is going on here? So at that moment, when I came back to the US, by the way, I ended up showing up to work. You know what I mean? I ended up finding another way to get to work. I was late, but I still found a way and I showed up. And I remember thinking to myself, all right, Justine, that you're 25 years old. Like, this is not the way that you want to live. Like, this is just not, you can't just keep like, you can't just keep saving your money and traveling and then trying to make ends meet. Like it just got so hard for me emotionally, mentally, physically, financially. I was just sick and tired of it. So for the remainder of my time in Istanbul, what I ended up doing was I was like, I need to make more money. So I asked my boss, I was like, how do I make more money? And he's like, well, I actually have this like private business gig at like a private business firm. If you want to go there and you want to do some tutorings on, Tuesdays and Thursday nights in the evenings, you can do that. So I was like, sign me up. So again, now I've extended my 12-hour day from 7 a.m., 7 p.m. to now 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And I was just hustling because I was like, I need more money. So when I came back to the United States, I was like, all right, Justine, that was breaking point number 1, where you don't ever want to be in that situation again where your safety is at risk, but also financially, you didn't have your shit together. You know what I mean? So you need to be better at tracking your money. You need to be better at budgeting. You need to figure out how you're gonna make more money in the States now to help kind of compensate for what you lost while you were in Turkey. It was a whole thing. Like it just broke me. So I learned at that point, I was like, all right, I need to start managing my cash flow and I need to start budgeting better, like, or start budgeting. I don't think I was budgeting when I was over there.
And that just reinforces the point that like we in America, we take so much for granted. Like, I don't understand. I don't think I could fathom the emotions of looking out my window. Well, first of all, I couldn't fathom the emotions of somebody bombing my apartment, right? That's just, I'm not even gonna hit on that because I'd scream, cry, do whatever. But I could not fathom looking out of my apartment, looking at the road, seeing that there's literally military movement outside, and I still have to find a way around that just to eat. I cannot fathom that. And if we came to that point in America, I think that most people could not fathom that. So, and it's great that you share this story because it it's great that you share this story because of the fact that people may look at the Justine now and be like, oh, she's lucky. Oh, she had a lawyer for a dad. But they don't see the Justine that was working 12 to 15 hours a day in another country, a war-torn country. Right. So it's so important to share these stories to see the things people have had to go through to get to where they are.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's like that one, it's like that one meme, right? Where you have like an ice,
Iceberg.
Yeah, the iceberg, and you see the tip of it and you're like, oh wow. And then you look below under the sea and you see how big it is. And just like, that's what I always think about. You just see the surface of people, but you don't really know like what's going on with them or what they've been through or what they've lived through or what they are going through. And so, yeah, I mean, if I can share that story, then I'm grateful that I can, because that really shaped it. I remember coming home and being like, damn, I never want to do that again. I was angry. I was angry, James. I came home pissed off. Like, I never want to do that again. I never want to be in that situation again. Like, this has got to change, girlfriend. So, having that like conversation, it was very humbling too. Very humbling because, coming from the US and then going there to Istanbul and then having to go through that, it was like, wow, you earn the US dollar. Like, you earn the US dollar, yo. Like, it was just crazy. But yeah, that was like breaking point number one. So at that point now, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be better with my cash flow management, and I'm going to track my money, and I'm going to be better at budgeting. Like, that was, and then that's when I started prioritizing my emergency fund.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go into breaking point number 2 because I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I'm on the edge of my seat right now, Justine.
So breaking point number 2. It was about, I want to say six years ago. Okay, 6 years ago, I was, I was in Vegas. I was in Vegas. I ended up in the emergency room. All right, I ended up in the emergency room, and I had health insurance from the company that I was working at in the US. I had health insurance. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is going to cover my expenses, right? Well, when I got the bill, that it was like $300, this medical debt, right? They basically billed me after, being in the emergency room and everything. I got this $300 and I was like, wait a second, why do I have to pay $300 for the emergency room? Like, my insurance is supposed to cover this. So I thought. So I call up the insurance company, and the lady on the phone tells me, hey, you're okay. You don't have to pay for anything. Don't worry about it. That's just going to go away. Like, we'll handle that. The insurance company and the hospital will take care of that. So in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm good. Right. But at the same time, I learned, I'm like, you know what, let me just call again and just, make sure that it's okay. So I called again, and then the person told me like, oh yeah, you're fine. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to, it's okay. So every single month from that conversation, I'm getting these little little notices. Hey, you owe $300. And I look at it, I'm like, no, I don't. And then I put it away. Next month, hey, you owe $300. I'm like, I look at it, I don't need it. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to worry about it. So then eventually I finally got this pink slip, right? And I was like, oh my God, this is gonna go into collections. You know what I mean? So basically what ended up happening is like I ended up going into collections because I didn't pay that $300 because I didn't question, I just took what the health insurance company told me, and then I didn't question it. I was just very prideful in saying like, oh, okay, I don't owe you guys money. And because I went into collections for $300, which I could have paid, by the way, I could have paid that. But to go into collections and then have that ding on my credit score, man, that hurt me right there. Because from going from a really good credit score and it dropped me down to like 600 or something like that, it hit me really, really hard. And so at that moment, it was me versus the healthcare system. And I knew, I was like, this is not how I want to live. Like this, and you know what? I was in the emergency room for a dumb reason too, to be completely honest, like a dumb reason. So I start to think it's like me versus the healthcare system. And I knew at that moment, I was like, you know what? I'm going to prioritize my health, and I'm going to be more on the, like, I need to be reactive instead of, I need to be proactive instead of reactive. Right. So I started taking care of my health and being more serious about it. I was like, I never want to end up in the emergency room again so that I have to deal with this medical debt. Nor do I want to go to the doctor because I have some kind of disease or illness or anything. So I was like, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to prioritize my health so I never have to deal with this again. Because it was so hard, man. And then this kind of transitions into my breaking point number 3. So we'll talk about that in a second. But like, it was so hard because to build myself back up, right, from the whole Istanbul experience of like building this emergency fund and trying to get myself back on my feet, and then getting slammed with this credit score drop, and then this medical debt collections, it just hurt me so badly financially. So I knew at that point, I was like, that's why I need to prioritize my health, bottom line. Because when you're not paying for monthly medical visits, when you're not paying for emergency room visits, when you're not paying for prescriptions or any of that, like that's more money in your wallet, baby, right? And that's more money that I could invest. You see what I'm saying? So there's that tie between financial fitness and all of that. But that was breaking point number 2. I was like, oh, hell no, girl, you ain't doing that again.
You know, our healthcare system in the United States it's really broken. And I think we can all agree on that. Nothing is transparent. You know, nobody knows what they need to pay, when they need to pay it. And it's very sad. And I had something similar happen where I got a bill, and it was for college. It was for a college course I took. I went through the course, financial aid, paid out, all was good, everything was fine. Like literally 12 months after I took the course, I get something in the mail. Oh, you owe $1,600, blah, blah. I call up the college. They're like, oh, you checked this box on your FAFSA, so they took away your student financial aid, blah, blah, blah. And it got to a point where they say, you know, no, we'll take care of it. We'll go through, edit it, blah, blah, blah. And the same thing happened that happened to you. Literally, I got a bill. I'm like, they said, don't worry about it. So I put it away. I got the second one. They said, don't worry about it, put it away. And then I got an email from collections. Luckily, I got the email from collections before they reported it on my credit. And of course, I had the money just like you did. So I went ahead, I just paid it, you know, and went on about my day. But it's such a broken system with like collections, and schools don't know how much tuition is, and they don't communicate with student financial aid, and healthcare doesn't communicate with the hospital. So I say all of that to say, for the listeners that are listening to these stories, control what you can control. You can't
Yeah.
control how other people do their job if they do it correctly. You can control what you can control. And sometimes footing the bill, at least in my opinion, for like a $300 bill, sometimes footing the bill is worth less of a headache than trusting someone else to do their job. So
I think that's powerful. And like, I'm going to add on to that, do your homework and like question it, because seriously, these companies, they keep it on the DL, like it's a business, right? It's a business. And I think that's why I'm such a strong advocate of like functional and preventative medicine, right? And being able to be proactive and not have to deal with this once something happens to you. So James, I want to share another experience. So a couple of years ago, as you mentioned, you know, life happens, man. Life happens. So even though I'm taking care of myself and being more like in tune with my body and my mind and just, you know, taking care of all of that. A couple years ago, I was on a scooter. All right. I was on a scooter and I hit like a rock or something in the road. I went flying off the scooter. I busted my chin open and I had to go to the emergency room. So things like that happen, right? Things like that happen where it's like, it wasn't intentional. Like I'm not going in there for, you know, an illness or something like that. Like it happened. And when I showed up to the emergency room, lo and behold, I get a nice bill in my, I get a nice little bill, $1,000 in my mail. Now, this is an older and wiser Justine. So I was like, oh, hell no, we're going to figure this one out, y'all, because I don't trust the healthcare system. I don't trust the insurance companies. Like, yo, I just don't. So I was like, okay. So I call that number up and I'm like, why am I being charged $1,000? Like I have a PPO, you know what I mean? Like I'm supposed to have the best. The lady on the phone, she's like, let me look at your account. She then goes on and tells me, you know what? You are being charged $1,000 because the doctor who operated on you isn't in your network. I was like, yo, what do you mean? And I remember being on the phone and started laughing because I was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, excuse me, I'm so sorry, but like, how? I got my chin busted open. I'm bleeding everywhere. You think I got the time to be like, yo, can y'all check and run and make sure my insurance, this doctor is covered by my insurance? And like, people don't think like that. You know what I mean? Like no one's going to question that. They're just going to be like, oh, and first of all, no one probably knows that. So I learned something new from that experience. I was like, oh, wow. Now we charge in based on whether that doctor's in the network or not, in network. So listeners, just a nice little tidbit for you. If you have health insurance, just so you know, if you end up in the emergency room with the doctor who operates on you or whatever doesn't have insurance, is not in your network, you could get dinged on it. So that's what it came down to. So me being now the bulldog that I am, I'm like, oh no, I'm not paying $1,000, y'all. That's not going to happen. Like that's some shady shit right there that you're not telling us, right? About being in network, out of network, all of that. So you know what I did, James? I kid you not. I called that insurance company every single day, following up on my case. Is it gone yet? What are you doing? And I actually befriended one of the workers because she was like, I'm going to help you out, honey, because this is what they don't tell you. And guess what she did? She got it erased. And and to me, that was eye-opening. That was eye-opening because that made me realize if they really wanted to, they could do it. And there are just things about the medical healthcare system that they're not sharing with you when it comes to billing. So again, I was so incredibly grateful I met that woman, but I was a bulldog, James. I was a bulldog and I refused. So every single day I called in at the same time and I spoke to that woman, and I would say it took about a month and a half. And then she's like, it's all gone now. The insurance company and the hospital, they figured it out. They're paying it. You're good to go. So I didn't have to pay for that. But, you know, I think about that and I'm like, we shouldn't have a healthcare system that does that. And I'm just glad that I learned from my previous mistakes and that so I hope this helps your listeners. And like, y'all, if you got medical debt or you got something happens, like call them, question them. Don't call them just once or twice, call them. You know what I mean? And be inquisitive.
Yeah. And the point is, like, you pay them, right? So they have an obligation to help you. Like, they have to, answer your calls. They have to explain it to you like you're a 5-year-old, right? Like, a lot of people, I was talking to my barber the other day, and he was talking about how he's not very a person of conflict. He kind of just goes along with whatever people say, but people end up taking advantage of him. When you are that way, if you are extremely agreeable and you don't want to be a bother for asking questions. And I put bother in quotations because I don't believe you can be a bother by asking questions, but people will take advantage of you. And they tried to do that to you, Justine, but it didn't work this time.
Oh, no. Because at that point I was like, we ain't playing this game no more because this is ridiculous. And I was in collections. Like, that sucks, and I was like, oh my God. So it's always this like, so that was breaking point number 2, where it was like me versus the healthcare system. And like me, in my mind, I was like, okay, girl, you need to take care of your health. You need to be more careful. You need to be proactive instead of reactive. And the less time you spend in the emergency rooms or in doctor visits or taking prescription pills, the more money in your bank, the more money you can invest, more money you can save. And that's like, to me, that's the win right there. And then not only that, James, but like, you're a healthier you. You know what I mean? You're a healthier you. You don't have to worry about all these other things, these health issues, perhaps, that could come up. You know what I mean? So that's the reason why my life changed that way, like, financially and health wise, because of that particular moment in my life when I went, into collections and the whole emergency room.
And shout out to Mama Christine, because I know that's where you got it from.
You know what?
Mama Justine, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. And let me say this, you know what? Shout out to my mother, because she feisty. Ooh, never mess with a Filipino mama. Like, let me tell you, they don't play. They don't play. And you know what my mom used to say? She used to tell me when I call the bank, she'd be like, hey, make sure when you call them, you write down the employee's name, their employee ID number, and the time you called and the date you called. And I used to think it was so annoying. James, when I called the insurance company every single day, I had a damn call log. I was like, okay, I talked to at this time on this day. Like, I had her employee number. And whenever I got someone else, I was like, yeah, but employee number, blah, 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 said this and this. So mom, yeah, you're right. Shoot, mama did teach me that. She did teach me that, So I had that log, and I was like, I will report your workers, because I was like, this is not cool. You guys are inconsistent with what you're telling the clients, the customers. And like, that's not cool. That's another discussion. We could probably talk about that on another podcast, or like, but that's, what I'm saying. So that was a big deal for me. Yeah.
Gotcha. So let's go to number 3, the last and final turning point, Justine. What happened?
So breaking point number 3, I was in a very, very toxic relationship, and very dangerous relationship. And so this was about six years ago, right? And I think to myself, if I didn't have that emergency fund, I honestly don't know where my life would be right now. And so you can imagine, I'm over here dealing with this collections debt. I'm also dealing with trying to save money. I'm also now in this like toxic relationship, and I'm like paying for this person. I'm taking care of this person because this person couldn't do that for whatever reason, you know what I'm saying? So being in this toxic and really dangerous relationship was my breaking point number three. There was an incident where my life was at risk and I had to leave. I had to leave. I literally packed all my stuff and I left. I stayed with a friend who was like, oh my God, two of them. I will always like remember those two women who took me in just to help me have a safe place. Right. And then I remembered looking for another apartment and I remember crying and being like, oh my God, please give this to me. Like, I need to leave, I need to leave. And it was in that moment, James, that I thought to myself, like, my emergency fund literally became my escape fund. So being in that toxic relationship, I had low key, I was like, you know what, this is not good. And so I started, saving in my emergency fund, and my emergency fund then became my escape fund. So with that money, and by the way, it wasn't a lot, it was like $2,000 or something like that. With that money, I took that money and I was able to put a deposit down, and I was able to find a new place, and I was able to leave that toxic and dangerous relationship. And so I always think that one of the biggest financial decisions you're ever going to make is who you choose to be your significant other, who you choose to be your partner. I'm going to say that. And some people don't like hearing that, but that was a moment for me, because I knew in that moment that I need to always have my own money. Now I'm in a very like loving and healthy relationship with my partner now, but I have boundaries that I have set for myself that I've learned from my previous relationship. And so I make sure that not only do I have my own emergency fund that's fully funded, but that I have my own, because you just never know what's going to happen in your life. You just never know. So if I didn't have that emergency fund, James, I wouldn't have been able to escape that abusive and toxic relationship. And I just think to myself every single day, and I think I do what I do because there are probably thousands of women out there and men and whoever who are in these relationships, but they cannot leave because they financially can't. Excuse me. They financially can't. It's one thing when you like emotionally can't leave, but it's another thing when you cannot financially leave a shitty situation. You know what I mean? So that's why I do what I do, because at the end of the day, like, I never want someone to go through what I went through, not because they financially couldn't get out of it. You know what I mean? And a lot of women, and anyone, actually, I should really stop saying women, but a lot of people can be stuck in these relationships because they literally don't have enough money to leave. So that was for me, that was one of the biggest breaking points. And that was breaking point number 3 for me, was knowing that I needed to have my own and establishing that financial boundary. And like, that was it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Justine. And regardless of what people think, right? Money is power and wealth gives you options. Having money gave you the option to leave the situation you were in. Even if it wasn't a lot of money, having something was better than having nothing. And I know for a fact there are going to be listeners, because you always get them, that are like, Justine, that's a terrible way to look at life. You are preparing to fail. If you get married and you have your own little bit of money, that's like you saying that the marriage isn't going to work, blah, 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 blah. To those people,
this is triggering me in so many ways.
I know. The reason I want to bring it up, because I want to go ahead and just dismantle that argument. It's better to need it and not have it than to have it. I mean, I'm sorry. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. It's like, and I have to dispel that, because there's going to be people like that, like people who listen to Dave Ramsey and they think every single dime should be together, and it's fine, that works for some people, but personal finance is personal. I have my own set of money, my wife has her own set of money, and then we have combined funds that works for us. But just because you and your spouse set up what you feel to be a safety measure doesn't mean you're planning for failure. It just means you're protecting yourself.
Oh,
And there's nothing wrong with that.
100%. It blows my, well, okay. You know what? James, I could literally talk about this all day, because this particular breaking point is very, it's a big trigger for me. And it really shaped the relationships that I looked at moving forward. You know, my partner and I right now, like, we are on the same level when it comes to money. He has his own, I have my own, but we also are building and growing together, right? And so I think that's really important, especially when it comes to your money. But I've had conversations with my girlfriends where they're like, I was like, you're going to sign a prenup? And they're like, no, if you sign a prenup, that means you don't love each other. And it's like, no, girl, I'm a big advocate of a prenup. I'm going to say it right now on this podcast, on this episode. I am a big advocate of prenups. Protect what's yours. It's not like what you can tell already. I'm getting all like, woo, about it. But just because you sign a prenup doesn't mean you don't love your partner. In fact, you know what I think that shows? That shows that you love yourself, right? Because you're protecting what is yours and what you own. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because guess what? You can have your own and you can have yours with your partner, with your significant other. But I've had girlfriends tell me, like, I don't want a prenup. That means you don't love them. Like, that means you don't trust your partner. I'm like, and you know, whatever that it means to them. But I have learned that love is not everything. Love is not everything when it comes to a relationship. You need to also have your own. And that doesn't even have to be about money, James. Like, you should also have a set of friends that you go to that is outside of your partner's friends. You should also have your own life and activities that you enjoy and that you love, and that's not part of your partner's. And your partner should have their own thing going on too. And, you know, I always think to myself that we are individuals that come together, and we have our life. Justine has her life. My partner has his life. And then we have our life. You know what I'm saying? And so I literally, not only am I talking about money, but I'm literally talking about everything else in that relationship. And so, y'all, don't get it twisted. I'm so glad we're talking about this, James, because this is important. But just because you sign a prenup or just because you have your own savings account does not mean you don't love your partner. I can't stress that enough.
Justine, I'm going to make this actually super duper simple, because we share the same opinion on a prenup. And someone said this to me in a completely, I was already pro prenup or postnuptial agreement, whichever one. And this just kind of solidified it. And I remember I heard it on a podcast. I don't remember who. But they said something. They said, here's the thing. When you get married, everyone has a prenup. It's called state law. So here is your choice. Either you and your spouse can come together, come to terms on if things happen to end, where things go, or you can let the government tell you what it does.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if you're married, but you will have a prenup if you ever get married. We will have a prenup if we ever get married. Everyone who ever gets married, you know, through using state and government officials, they will have a prenup. Who has the power to set those terms? Is it you and your spouse, or is it the government? And it was at that point, it's just, so whether you like a prenup or not, you are going to have it. Whether you like a postnuptial agreement or not, you're going to have it. It's just a matter of fact of whether they're going to tell you where your assets are going to go and how it's going to be split and how the kids are going to go, or you and your spouse are going to be able to come to those terms. Yeah. And I am a big advocate of, I want control over my life. I want to control what I can control. And I want my wife to be able to control what she can control. So we are going to set terms for our family, not the government. So I
Yeah.
am 100% pro prenup, Justine. You ain't gonna get no argument from me at all.
Yo, I love what you just said. I love what you just said. And I agree with you. Are you going to allow someone to make that decision for you, or you and your partner going to make that decision? So, fun little fact, James, I used to work, I wanted to be a lawyer, actually. I wanted to be a lawyer. And while I was prepping to become a lawyer, I worked in a courthouse. So, I did a lot of divorce cases. So, I would sit down with the one filing for divorce, the one responding to a divorce case. And let me tell you something, y'all, and let me say this, y'all, you don't know a person until you don't give them what they want, period. Yo, this is why I say what I say. Like, you don't know a person until you don't give them what they want. You wait to see how they react, because a lot of these people that I met in divorce court, man, they were fighting over money. They were fighting over furniture. People will become petty when they don't get what they want. So I have seen it. I have filled those papers out, those divorce papers out. I've worked with clients. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know what that looks like. And it's ugly. I have friends whose parents went through divorce, which is so shitty. It sucks, right? But it's real and it happens. And the number one cause of divorce is your financial situation. So I talk to my girlfriends now. I'm not married, right? I'm not married, but I talk to my girlfriends we're at that age. I'm 33 years old, right? We're at that age where, like, people are now settling down. They're getting married and wanting to start families. I talk to my girlfriends and I tell my girlfriends, I was like, because they'll come to me and talk to me about, what's their financial situation. And the one thing I tell them is this: yo, you need to talk, make sure you talk to your significant other and you are transparent about your finances with them. You need to be straight up. If you don't like what he's doing, right, and you're trying to build together, you need to talk to him. If you don't like what she's doing, you need to talk to her, right? If you don't like what they're doing, you need to talk to them. At the end of the day, y'all need to be talking about your finances before you tie the knot. And it's fucking crazy how some people are like, once I get married, now I'm gonna try to change this person. I'm gonna try to have them do this and that and all this nonsense, when y'all should be having those conversations beforehand. If you want a serious relationship with someone and you want to plant those roots with that person, have those conversations early, you guys. Do not be afraid of having those conversations. I can't stress that enough. Because y'all need to talk through that, go over the mountains, go through the valleys, go over the mountains, go through the valleys, have those conversations. And do not wait until you get married, where you probably won't sign a prenup, which y'all should sign a prenup. You know what I mean? And then try to have those conversations. Like, God, I can't stress that enough. Number one reason for divorce: medical debt. Not medical debt, but
Finances. Yeah. And whether we like to accept it or not, because it's evil to say this or whatever people want to say, marriage is truly a business, right? Yeah. You're taking yourself and someone else and you are combining to hopefully create something bigger. When you go into business with someone, some people might not understand this, but you always set the business terms up front. You never wait until the business is going to finally set terms, because then that's when people say, oh, that's not fair, or that's, you're getting more than me, or you're doing more than I am in this business, or whatever. So when a divorce happens, you're turning a marriage into just a business transaction. You're getting these things, you're getting this, you're getting that, you're getting this, and we are completely separating ties. It's a lot easier to come to an agreement, come to an understanding or when you're on good terms than it is when you're in the heat of emotions. If someone files for divorce on you and you are, you're going through your emotions, now you want to, then comes in spite, then comes in envy, then comes in lust, or all these other emotions that ties. So having something on paper that says, and unfortunately, it needs to be legal, right? This isn't a sticky note on the fridge to say, if God forbid
Yeah.
this happens, this is what we're going to do, because the state cares nothing about that. You didn't put a sticky note on the fridge when you got married. You actually went to the courthouse. You guys changed your names if that's what you do. You actually went to whatever links it was to get married. You didn't do it on a sticky note. Therefore, if you're going to be protecting yourself and protecting each other, because this is all an act of love. This is you saying, look, I'm going to protect you in case things don't go how we want it to. And this is how you're going to get the house. I'm going to get the cars. We're going to split the children, whatever the case is. That is an act of love. So always do it on when you're on good terms, because when you're on bad terms, it's too late, and it needs to be legal, in writing, signed, notarized, filed, whatever the case is. That way, if someone gets spiteful, because I'm sure you heard this working in divorce, is like, I never thought she would do this to me, or I never thought he would do this to me. Well, you never saw them in their lowest. And that's what divorce ends up being in most cases.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And you know what? It's heartbreaking, because a lot of the people that came in were women, and these were women that gave up their finances once they got into a relationship. You know, they literally handed over all their money or control of their money to their partner. And so now here they are stuck. And by the way, James, this was like one of my biggest things. Like, it is so important that you never, ever, ever give up your financial independence when you're in a relationship. I can't stress that enough. I cannot stress that enough. The moment you give up your financial independence when you're in a relationship, you've now giving your control to someone else. You're allowing that person to now control your finances. And then you get stuck. And like, that's going to hurt some people right now, that when they hear this on the podcast, or whoever hears that, like, it's going to hit them real quick.
I actually was just typing a note. Like, that is very, very harsh to say, but let's look at the examples of people who did, and let's get their opinion.
Yeah.
Because they're going to tell you, like, I wish I did not give up all of my independence. And guys, I want to be very clear with what we're talking. We're not saying to keep everything separate, sleep in separate rooms, have different houses. We're not going to that extreme, right? But you should be able to have your own spending account, and you guys should be able to come to an agreement to say, look, I'm going to spend $100 a week on whatever I want to. Don't ask me no questions. Don't be about it. None of that. I don't want your opinion. and that's perfectly healthy, right? That is perfectly healthy to have that. And like I said, my wife and I have my own checking account and all my savings where my money goes in, and it's under my full control. My wife, has her own bank account. All of our money goes in. We have a joint savings, a joint checking, joint savings account. We have an emergency fund. We have where our bills come out. We both pay bills. We both agreed on how much we're going to put in, and we run our household out of that account. Everything else, yeah, we talk to each other when we're laying in bed, like, oh, I decided to, buy this stock, or I decided to go buy this clothing. It's like, well, that was dumb, but I mean, it's your money. And that is a very healthy thing. So we're not going to the extreme to say you need to stay completely separated once you get married and you become one, but you shouldn't give up 100% of your independence, and you should never become hyper dependent on someone else, because you don't know what they're capable of.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head on that. I definitely don't want to be spreading the words and saying, like, you need to keep everything separate, no, you can have and share with your partner, but you should also have for yourself. Like, that's so important. I love, and what you described, by the way, I definitely subscribe to that. And I usually tell, like, my clients, who I work with, keep a separate savings account for you. Keep a separate checking account for you. And that's your money that you can play with, have fun with, do whatever you want with without your significant other questioning it. And then they will have their own. And then as a team, right, you'll have your own savings accounts, and you guys can decide how much is going to go into that savings each month, how much is going to go into whatever it is, your investments you have as a team, you know, as a couple. But definitely having just that separate ownership is so incredibly important. So incredibly important. And I really want to normalize that, you know, and whew, I know it sounds harsh, but like, it's so important that you don't give up your financial independence. It's so important.
No, it is harsh, but it's the reality we live in at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
you hear so many horrible stories about, you know, women who are forced to stay in situations due to financial reasons or and stuff like that. And if we can take that off the table, meaning we can make it normal for that not to happen, like that doesn't mean I don't love you just because I have this little bit of extra money over here. Like, but people will manipulate you into thinking that that's the case. So me and Justine are here to tell you, like, that isn't the case. Like, it's not completely selfish. You're not a terrible mother or a terrible father if you have a little bit of money to do your own thing, and it's not selfish to want to retain a little bit of independence.
Right, right, exactly. And you know, I also think like you're not asking permission. You know what I'm saying? So if you, for example, you want to go and buy like, I don't know, a new pair of jeans, for example, right? You're not going to your partner and saying like, hey, can I take 25 bucks out of our savings account to buy these pair of jeans? You're not asking for permission. You're able to buy those pair of jeans on your own because you have your own money that doesn't belong to your partner as well. You know what I mean? That you're not sharing. So I don't know. I really am a big advocate of ownership, financial ownership, and just really putting yourself first. And you've dropped this word a few times, James, selfish. And I think that's powerful because you are not you're not selfish if you have your own separate savings account. You're not selfish if you have your own checking account. You're not selfish if you have your own investments. You know what I mean? I think the longest relationship you're ever going to be in is with yourself. And so invest in you and be in a relationship with you. Because guess what? If something happens to you and your partner and things don't work out and you end up breaking up, guess who else you're with? You. So that's why I can't stress enough. I love that we're talking about this because at the end of the day, you got you and only you, no matter what happens in life. You know, you just never know. The person you're going to be stuck with or with is right there. Right?
Yeah, and then I just want to the last thing on this subject, right? You named a bunch of things that, you know, doesn't make you selfish. Now, let's name some things that would make you selfish. If you put your wants over the necessities of the household, that's where you can become selfish. If you have a choice between buying a nice pair of jeans or feeding your kids for the week, you can become selfish at that point. So what we are talking about only works if you're able to provide what you need to provide, right? Yeah. So you can have your wants, but they have to come after your necessities, because if you start putting your wants over the necessities of your household or even of yourself, then you are being selfish. So
100%. I'm glad you brought that up. I agree. I absolutely agree, you know.
So, like I said, guys, we're going to wrap up part 1 of that interview right there. And I hope you guys understand what I meant by she has such an explosive and a really special emphasis in the way she expresses herself, which is awesome. And some may seem it as rasp or harsh, but I love it when people are real and they stand up for the things they believe in. I mean, we talked about her personal situation on how, you know, having an emergency fund can really make you or break you. We discussed prenups, which I know is an extremely, extremely sensitive topic when it comes to some people. But at the end of the day, this is just our opinions. You guys can do what you want, but we're going to live our life the way we want to. And hopefully we might have opened the eyes of some of you guys to think, okay, you know what, maybe this isn't such a bad thing. Maybe having a little bit of individuality in a relationship is not such a bad thing. And some may be thinking, oh, yeah, you're absolutely crazy. I'm not going to do that, which is perfectly fine. But the point of this whole podcast is to get so many different viewpoints and just listen to what people believe in and either disagree about it and move on, but at least learn about it, or to, enlighten yourself and be like, you know what? I never thought of it that way. I never thought that me and my husband, we have a prenup already. It's just the state decided what our prenup was, not us. And then you can decide to take control, whether it's getting a postnuptial agreement or whatever the case may be. So these are just things that, having the conversation and not being afraid to offend someone with your beliefs and being able to stand on your beliefs, it can be super duper duper beneficial. But of course, guys, I offer financial coaching. You can find that link down in the show notes. There's a free consultation over the telephone if you guys want that for your personal finance things. You can always follow us on all of our social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and all that great stuff. That's all down in the show notes. And of course, Justine's information is going to be down in the show notes. But like I said, she's going to be back on next week's episode to continue the conversation, and we get just deeper and more into this great topic. So I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm your host, James Bowman. And remember, you're only as secure as your ability to perform. So spend your life accumulating assets that can perform for you. Later, guys.